May God bless the reading of the Word. How are you doing, folks? It's hot, right? That's why you notice I'm wearing this way, because I don't want to be suffocated here in front while the rest of you is just sitting there. That's unfair, right? Yeah, I learned a lot from the lecture of Dr. Tui last night. Learned something that is loose. So I was thinking of wearing a short sleeve shirt. My wife said no. She's the boss. I have to follow. But I told her I'm not going to wear any tie because it's hot. It's really hot. How are you doing, folks? I'm glad to see all of you. We are excited today because we're going to have baptism for the second, last week we did not have one. 2 weeks ago. Maybe we can shut the door so that the cold air will stay inside. We don't want the hot air coming in. The title of my sermon is Wired to Connect. What was read to you by my daughter was a beautiful picture of a community. So we're going to be talking about a community today. But I would like to start with this question. Are we called to be an aggregation or a congregation? Are we called to be an aggregation or a congregation? It was a common practice in the West back in the early centuries for someone who makes a vow of asceticism to journey to different shrines and pilgrims. This practice was called back then peregrinatio, or in English, wandering. The purpose of this is to go to places where they will be far from their hometown. Some might think that this peregrinatio is similar to missionary works or doing mission trips, right? In which the purpose of going to one particular place is to evangelize and spread the news. But this practice is different, right? This practice is different. For these monks and nuns, the whole purpose of this wandering is not to go to a certain place for a specific goal like mission or evangelism, but this is part of their self-imposed exile in response to the vows they made to God. And when you talk about monasticism and living an ascetic life, maybe the first person that would come to your mind is Antony of Egypt. Have you heard of that name? Antony of Egypt? Known to be the father of monasticism. He felt the calling of God. And in his pursuit to living a life that is in line with God's will, he encountered this text that says, if anyone will come after me, he will deny himself and take up the cross. And he encountered this story as well of the rich young ruler in which this guy came to Jesus and asked Jesus, how can I be saved? And Jesus said, you have to get rid of all your riches. Remember that story? And as a result of this and his pursuit to be true to the calling, after his parents, Antony, I'm talking about Antony, after the demise of his parents, he sold all his inheritance, gave it to the poor and the needy, leaving nothing to his underage sister, and he lived a life in isolation, full of prayer, meditation, and fasting. But centuries after, maybe 2 centuries after Antony, of course, the practice of asceticism became so popular right, became so popular. But there's one guy that brings this, or that brought this practice or monasticism, the practice of monasticism and asceticism into a different level. His name was Pachomius. You know, we're talking about history here, folks. Pachomius. All right? Pachomius. He introduced, a version of a monastic life completely different from the way Anthony lived his life. If Anthony lived his life in isolation, Pachomius introduced a new version of an ascetic and a monastic life in which it's all about communal living. Communal living. The story of Pachomius is very interesting because after his time serving in the army, he left the army and established a community somewhere in Egypt in which the goal is to live a community patterned to the early Christian in the book of Acts, in which everybody that is present in that particular community is not wanting anything because everything is supplied, because everybody is looking after each other. Later on, the monasteries became so popular until our time. And from that practice of living in isolation to living in a communal life, monasteries now became a place where those people who have dedicated their lives entirely to the work of God and in service to the poor can practice their ascetic life. It became a haven for those who were seeking refuge from political abuses and oppression. And that also became a center of evangelism, education, and a seminary. And according to one author, he said, it was at the level of day-to-day life among lay people of all social classes that monasticism had its greatest and most lasting impact in the West. From being or living an isolated life to living a communal life. As you can see, my dear brothers and sisters, just like what I said, the idea of monasticism is from isolation, it turned into what? A monastic life. The fact is, none of us can live in isolation. We all need each other, right? We all need each other, right? Genesis chapter 1 verse 26 gave us a picture of this. Genesis 1:26 gave us a glimpse of our makeup as a person, when God said, let us make man in our image. Well, some people would, understand this differently, or, maybe you can have different interpretation of this. But when you talk about in the context of a communal, living, God being, creating us in His image is very, very important. On the way we ought to live our life in this world. Because when you talk about God, you are not just talking about one person. You are talking about three persons. But yet they are one. Right? They're one. So in that sense, having God, one God, but yet three different persons, we can say that God Himself is a community. And being created by God, who is a community, you who are created, us who are being created in His image, should live our life patterned to that community. We have to be in a community as well. So that was before they created humans. And after they created human, what did God say? In Genesis chapter 2 verse 18, He said, it is not good for man to be what? To be alone. You have to understand that these words should not be understood within the context of marriage only. Right? Because even married couple needs what? A community where they have to be a part of. Right? A study was conducted about the effects of social relationships on morality risk. And this meta-analysis was published in the Journal of Psychological Bulletin in 2015, includes 70 studies involving over 3.5 million participants. The researchers found that social isolation, loneliness, and living alone were associated with an increased risk of morality. That is wonderful, right? Morality. The study emphasized the importance of social relationships in promoting health and well-being. Well, I'm just showing you one of the many studies that I've done, right? In fact, a few years ago, this Loma Linda, where we are right now, actually, even though this is Redlands, we're so close to Loma Linda, it was featured in CNN, right? Remember that story? Why Seventh-day Adventists live 10 years longer than the majority of the people around the world? Because of what? One of the reasons, according to the interview that was done, is because of what? Community. Community. Right? The question again that I would like to ask from you, the same question that I asked from you earlier, are we called to be an aggregation or a congregation? Maybe some of you are wondering, what is aggregation? Well, when you talk about aggregation, it is a collection of people who happen to be at the same place. Listen to this, folks. Aggregation is a collection, is a group of people who happen to be at the same place at the same time, but who otherwise have no other connection to each other. It is merely the sum total of all its parts. So if the question is, are we called to be just an aggregation or a congregation? My answer is no, right? We are called to be a congregation, which means a community doing together, right? Doing life together, being in a relationship with each other. And this is basically what community is all about. But the truth, my dear brothers and sisters, is we are already living in the 21st century, right? You and I are living in the 21st century. However, many of us among Christians are still practicing the second and the third centuries way of monastic life. Living your life in isolation. Living your life as an aggregation, not a community. Right? That's why all throughout the Bible, you will find there the analogy of the Bible. Analogy of a church as a body. Right? A church as a body. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. You will find there, for just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit, we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink at one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. You and I are part of this one body. That's why, we do communion service, right? That's why, can I roll this up because I'm sweating a lot already? Sorry, folks. Yeah, so we are doing communion service because we are doing communion service, right? Because what? We are doing it as a body. We don't do communion service individually. We are doing it because we are promoting that we are together in this. And who is the head of this community? The head is whom? Jesus Christ, right? That's why the encouragement, which is the main focus of our study, the encouragement for us is in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And if you have your Bibles with you, I would like you guys to open it with me. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. Right? Because after this, I'll be mentioning three disciplines that I would like you and I to incorporate in our life, in living a communal life. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. Are you guys there? Please say amen if you're there. It's fine to use your Bible, as long as, your cell phone, if you have your Bible up, as long as you're not allowing yourself to get distracted. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. I read, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Right? This is a beautiful text, right? So the writer of Hebrews explained how God designed the Christian community, right? How God designed, the Christian community. Now, just like what I said, I'll be giving you 3 disciplines that we need to incorporate in our communal living. The first discipline is this. Based on this text, the first one is to live a communal life, we need to continue living or meeting together. We need to continue meeting together. All right? It's interesting that the Greek word for meeting in this text is what? Episynagoge. All right? Episynagoge. And this is the word from which we get the word synagogue in the Bible. You mentioned that. That was the earliest term, that you can find in the Bible when they refer to what? When they refer to a church. Episynagoge, or a synagogue, right? It means congregation or assembly. So now, what is the importance of meeting together? Remember pandemic time? Right? We closed the church. We decided to just meet online. We see each other, but, even though we're miles away from each other, yes, we're connected, but it's different, right? It's different. That's why after a year of being in lockdown, being isolated at the comfort of your homes, you were craving for what? A community fellowship like this. Because, you can see the importance of not just seeing each other, but, just fellowshipping together. We miss the potluck. We miss singing together. We miss hanging out with each other, right? So this is the beauty of being together. That's why the first discipline that we can get, from this text in Hebrews chapter 10 is what? We need to keep meeting together. This is very important, folks. That's why, I know that, what happened? Probably you have observed that after the pandemic, not all the members have already come back. Because the truth is, the reality is, a lot of people, not just in our church, but even in other churches, they get so comfortable just watching worship services on screen. Because with that, they don't have to get up, they don't have to change their clothes, right? They just have what? To walk. They just have to sit down and stay at home. All right? Comfort. But you have to. That's why, if you are one of these people that you are watching right now, let me tell you something. There's beauty and there's a lot of blessings that you can get when we meet together in person. And this is one of the practices that, a community designed by Christ itself should be doing. You should keep meeting together, right? We should keep meeting together. And the second one, folks, the second practice is be that someone. Be that someone. If I, were to ask you, what is the main verb of this text? Again, you can refer to Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. What is the main verb of this text? Maybe some of you would say, maybe the word spur one another on. Well, you can make your case about it. But for me, the main verb of this text is the word consider. Now, what is the importance of the word consider here? If you are talking to someone, and this person told you, hey, Brother Eli, you have to consider your decision. What was he trying to imply? What was he trying to imply? What was he trying to tell you? Well, for me, my understanding is this person is telling you that you have to pause and what? Take a look again of what you are about to to do, right? So consider, it means you stop and you think, right? It means you stop and we think. So when we come together, and when I say, be that someone, we need to stop and think how we can be a blessing to others. How we can help someone to grow. And just, this should be the mentality of each one of us, right? We're talking about communal living, right? Communal living. We should be thinking of what we can do to others. But the reality, folks, is a lot of times we think of our relationships in terms of what we can get from others. Maybe before you decided to be part of this church, you're thinking, what can this church do to me, to my spirituality? When you decided, before you decide to get into whatever jobs you have, you're thinking, what can this job do to me? Would it pay me well? Would I be able to survive? Would I be able to support my family's needs? Right? Those are the questions. Because in reality is, we always think of what this thing can do for us. Right? But when you talk about communal living, my dear brothers and sisters, we should be doing the other way, right? Rather than thinking of what this person or this group can do for us, we have to start thinking of what we can do to this community. That's why the next practice that I would like you to incorporate in our practice as a community is what? Be that someone. Be that someone. Right? That's why this week, my dear brothers and sisters, let me challenge you. Let me challenge you. How can you be that someone to somebody this week? Think of a person that you can be that someone to this person this week. Maybe one of your friends have lost a loved one. Call that person. Be that someone. Maybe that person, one of your friends have lost a job. Call that person. Give him or her something. Right? Maybe you are assuming, he might not need anything, because he has a lot of money. But, just give them a call, and I'm pretty sure they will appreciate your call. Be that someone. Always think of how we can be of help or a blessing to people around us or to the community where we belong. Right? And this is the biblical community, the main idea of a biblical community that Christ had established in this earth. And the third practice, so we're done with the first two practices. The first practice was what again? Keep meeting together. And the second practice was what? Be that someone. And the third practice is this. Practice the one another. Practice the one another. I just Googled it this morning, and you know what I found out? Because you can find a lot of commands about being one another. You can find it all over, the New Testament. And I found out that there's like 59 commands with the words one another in the book of New Testament only. In the New Testament only. You will find there, be at peace with each other. Right? Wash one another's feet. Love one another. Be devoted to one another. Honor one another. Live in harmony with one another. Stop passing judgment with one another. All of these one another, folks, 59 times mentioned in the New Testament. Why do you think it was mentioned that many times, in the New Testament? Because God wants you and me to practice that one another way of life. Because just like what I said, we should be living not in isolation. We should be living as a community. In this text alone, when you talk about the command of living that one another type of living, you can find two commands that has that phrase or words, love one another, one another. Right? The first one is spur one another on. Right? Don't you know that originally, some other translation use the word provoke instead of the word spur spur. Right? So, when you use the word provoke, it goes like this. Provoke one another on. All right? In other words, irritate one another on. Right? So, when I say, I'm talking about tough love here, my dear brothers and sisters, right? I'm not talking about bad way of doing it, okay? I'm talking about always being on your heels, making sure that the people that is around you is what? Doing great. You know, just imagine you being a parent. You're always on your heels, or not heel toes, I mean. It's the other way, the opposite. All right? Because you want to make sure that your kid will do good in school, in the society, in church, right? Right? This is basically what this text is talking about by saying that we have to what? Spur one another on. Right? Spur one another on. According to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, it says, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of Christ. This is the goal, right? This is the goal. You will only see that you are growing as a mature Christian if your mentality changes from what this church can do for me into what I can do to this church. Once you get to that level, you would say that, you are maturing as a Christian. And we need to be in this level, my dear brothers and sisters. We cannot be staying on a baby level. We have to We have to mature. And that's one of the proof. You're thinking of what you can do to the community, where you belong. Right? Because according to Ephesians 4:15, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of Christ. And the second one here, the second command here with one another is what? Encouraging one another. Did you guys get that one? We need to encourage one another, right? We are here not to put everyone down. We are here not to just, none of us is perfect. And that is a fact. All of us, we have different flaws in life, right? We have different flaws in life. None of us is perfect. So you have to remember that once you point your finger to someone, you're just using one of your fingers, but you are pointing how many fingers back to you? You're using 3 fingers back to you. Because the reality is, all of us make mistakes, right? So instead of putting someone down, we have to start encouraging one another. Gary Chapman, in his book, The 5 Love Languages, he used these words as a way of showing love to people. The first one is words of affirmation, quality time. The third one, physical touch. Fourth one, gifts of acts of service. Gifts and acts of service. Those are the 5 types of love languages. And we should be what? When you think of what you can do to the community where you are, you should be incorporating all of this. Now, what is the reason why I'm doing this, my dear brothers and sisters? What is the reason why I decided to talk about community today? Let me tell you. In this very difficult world that you and I are living, just like what I said, we need each other. And to be honest with you, meeting once a week in church is not enough in order for you and for me to survive spiritually in this very, very difficult world. We need each other. That's why, let me tell you great news. And I'm going to ask, I didn't ask these guests to do this, but this is going to be a surprise thing. I'm going to ask Rick, Ate Cora, and Kathy to please rise. Just to show to our people here. Please rise, please stand. Thank you, folks. You guys can sit down now. These are members of our small community in Beaumont. A small community in Beaumont. They're not members of this church, but they're here because they feel that they want to be part of a community. And we have other members that are part of this small community back, or our small group. That's a term that we use in Beaumont. And the great news is our small group is not small group anymore, because it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. A couple of days ago, I met this couple from Beaumont. I just mentioned, you're from Beaumont. We have a small community that meets every Wednesday night. Would you be interested in becoming part of it? And she told me, you know what, Pastor? This is an answered prayer, because I've been looking and praying for this. I'm going to be there. Unfortunately, she was not able to join us last Wednesday because she would have a procedure, at the hospital. But she said, next time, I'm going to be joining your group. And we can even host the Bible study, in our home. And you know what? I have friends, in the neighborhood that I can also invite. My dear brothers and sisters, this is the power of a community. And the truth is, a lot of people in the area where you belong, where you are living, that are longing for a community like this. All we have to do is what? Just to invite them and be part of this. Be part of this. Last Sunday, we have started a new community in Colton. A new community in Colton. And I was able to show you the picture, I did not project it there. And yeah, there's Ate Clem. We are meeting at Ate Clem's house. And of course, the goal is to have more small communities within a big community. I know that we have a community that meets every 5 a.m. Right? 5 a.m. online. If you are an early riser, we encourage you to be part of this, led by Tiara and Grace and Pastor Ravilo, right? So, as you can see, my dear brothers and sisters, the reason why we're doing this is because we want to give you different options, Yes, we have services in our church once a week, and Friday night, of course, right? But during the week, we need to stay connected. Remember the first practice, the first discipline? We need to keep meeting together. And this is very, very important, because within this setting, this is the time that we can encourage one another. This is the time that we can be more involved with the life of the other members of that small community. And this is very, very important in our life as a Christian, because without this, my dear brothers and sisters, let me tell you this, you cannot survive. You cannot survive. That's why my challenge to all of you is, get involved. Get involved. If you want to host a small community, let us know. We're going to help you. If you want to be part of these small communities that we have, be there. Be there. I encourage you. Sister Kari is telling me she's always excited, especially when she saw that, people are joining. You said, man, we are growing. And she's very, very excited. I could see that excitement in her face. My dear brothers and sisters, this is how God designed you and me. That is the truth. You cannot live in isolation. Right? Well, you can say that you can be a part of different communities like CrossFit community, like what else? LA fitness community. Well, you can, but you have to have what? You have to have a purpose why you're doing this. And how God designed this is, just like what was described in the book of Acts, where they, according to the text, they were together and they were of the same heart and mind, because they have only one purpose while they're doing it. We're not doing this just for fun. Yes, fellowshipping and eating together is part of this, but that is not the main purpose why we gather together. That is not the main purpose why we meet together. The main purpose is what? For us to continue encouraging one another as we continue our journey in this very difficult world. My dear brothers and sisters, let me challenge you again. Get involved. Get involved. Be part of a community. And let me tell you now, once you become part of a community, You're going to be blessed. You're going to be blessed. I'm thinking that one of these Fridays, Vespers, Dr. Wilson, I already mentioned this to some of the members of our group. Our group will be doing the Vespers meeting, and you're going to hear their testimonies. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to be blessed. So we don't want to keep this story in us only, right? We want you to experience this as well. That's why my challenge to all of you today is get involved, find a community, and you will be blessed. May God bless all of us today.